Adam Amin, play-by-play broadcaster for ESPN. I know he's itching to get back to work, and maybe you'll get to at some point. Adam, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing all right, my friend. How are you?
How forward, being a Chicago guy, how forward are you looking to viewing The Last Dance, which premieres tomorrow night, or premieres, I should say, Sunday night on ESPN, the story of the 97-98 Bulls, and Phil Jackson knew he was going to be out even if he went 82-0, and Jordan knew it was his last go-round, and Jackson tabbed at The Last Dance, and boy, this looks like it's going to be some incredible, compelling television.
Yeah, agreed, Gary. Obviously, this is my childhood. This was me at 11, 12 years old, and really in my formative years as a basketball fan. This was the end of the era. This was The Last Dance. This was the sixth title in 8 years for arguably one of the more dominant dynasties in the history of American sports. Certainly in a shorter term, in just an 8-year span to win 6 titles. I have great memories of that year, whether it's the playoff series, whether it was the rematch with the Jazz, one of the tougher conference finals series that MJ had ever played in, the hype that was surrounding the team that year. That was the year that I really learned, like in those 3 years, I learned really what Dennis Rodman was all about. You get educated a lot when you follow stories about Dennis Rodman when you're in your, right before your teen years. So a lot of formative education, I think, in a lot of ways. But honestly, like that entire era, in particular, those last 3 titles that were, that started up with that 72-win season, and you thought, wow, this team might be just untouchable. You thought this might be, one of the greatest teams in American sports history. And the hype that surrounded it between Rodman, the hype around Jordan, and the discussion around being the greatest player, Jackson, who had won over a lot of people and a lot of skeptics in the city of Chicago after he took over for Doug Collins with these kind of Zen-like methods of coaching and how to deal with the egos and the high maintenance personnel that he had to deal with as a head coach, and how he navigated that. There were so many fascinating storylines, and like I said, for me personally, it's just such a formative time as a sports fan, and in particular as now somebody who calls Bulls games. I fill in for the Bulls, and I call games for them. To be a part of that now and part of the fabric of that, it means that much more now. So I'll be very, very excited to watch that on Sunday.
Yeah, a lot of us will. All right, what about and Shaq is Shaq, and Shaq physically might be the most dominant player we've ever seen in the history of the National Basketball Association. But he and Kobe won 3 straight with the Lakers. Of course, the Bulls might have won 8 straight had Jordan not taken a break. But Shaq says his Lakers would have easily beaten the Michael Jordan-led Chicago Bulls that won those 6 titles in 8 years. And nobody's going to convince Shaq otherwise. I get that. What do you say?
Yeah, hard to want to lean toward Shaq, right? Just because, there's so much discussion around Jordan being the greatest of all time and those teams being so good. I honestly think that Shaq has a point, but it's not. I think the reasoning behind it and the perception of it is gonna differ depending on what camp you start in. I think saying that those Lakers teams could beat those Bulls teams isn't necessarily an indictment of the Bulls, or to say that the Lakers are, a better looked at franchise in NBA history. I think it's just about the era, and this was a separation of not many years, but enough years, 3 or 4 years, where the rules had significantly changed post-Jordan. The physicality that Shaq played with that was allowed at that point, to have Bryant, starting a 30,000-point career and be in the I think year 5 at that point for Kobe, year 5 or 6 when they started becoming really competitive. I feel like Shaq could easily have a point, and I would trust his opinion, obviously. Obviously, he's going to be biased, but those Shaq teams were as dominant of forces at that time of the NBA in the late years of the physical era. So I don't think that's way off target. I think it'd be a lot closer. I don't think it'd be an easy win. I think it could be one of the greatest 7-game series of all time, but I don't think it'd be easy.
We'll never know. I just have and I love Shaq, and like you said, but I just have I couldn't bet against Jordan in a final series. I don't know if Jordan and that Bulls team were playing the great Celtics teams of the '60s, or the Magic Johnson led Lakers, or the Larry Bird led Celtics, or Hakeem and the Rockets, or any of these, or the Spurs, any of these great teams. I mean, I just think
Gary, I don't know if this makes sense, but as the years go on, you have to keep remembering that the players are getting more and more and more and more and more physical. Like, even though the physicality may not be allowed in the game as much, because that margin is so slim, if you're a strong player like a LeBron, you're going to be able to play at a physical level consistently in a league that may not allow it as much. So I always have to take into consideration that if Jordan had been playing in this era, he would probably translate as well as any other player. Now, granted, he may take more threes and less jump shots if he were playing today, but not necessarily, and he'd still be very efficient. And I think that's what makes these arguments in this sport so much fun, because the comparisons about eras are so distinct, whereas in baseball, those eras take 70, 80 years, right? Dead ball era, live ball era. These are time stretches of hundreds of years we're talking about, or 100 years we're talking about. Whereas in the NBA, these eras go by after like 10, 15 years. So there's a lot of crossover, and that's what makes these conversations fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun, man. It'd be really neat if we could somehow arrange that. Never will happen, though. Something else we're looking forward to, or I am, Adam, is the NFL draft. We talked about this a little bit last week. They're doing it, as a virtual draft. Everyone's going to be practicing safe social distancing. I'm looking forward to it. I think the ratings are going to be off the hook. We're starved for sports. There's a lot of drama to me. Not at number one with the Bengals. I think they're going to take Burrow. I think the Redskins are going to take Chase Young. We're not sure what the Lions are due. Maybe they'll take Okudah. Maybe they could take a quarterback. I feel like that this Tua drama is real. I think there's a move by the Dolphins possibly to take Herbert. Tua could wind up in Los Angeles, which I think would be great for the Chargers if they could get him. But I think there'll be some excitement and some drama here. First, your thoughts on the draft and going ahead and holding it. And secondly, I want you to give us your thoughts on when Tua will eventually wind up.
Sure. No, I like that they're doing this virtually. I think it is possible. We've discussed this. I think it's a great event for TV. There's a lot of work being done by a lot of smart people at both NFL Network and at ESPN to make that work and to make it a great presentation. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it's done from a technical aspect. Sure. Just to see how friends and colleagues put this show together, right? And Gary, you're obviously so familiar with how TV works behind the scenes, so you know how much work it takes from the folks behind the scenes to make it work. It'll be a great feat, I'm sure. I look forward to seeing how everybody pulls it off. Now, in terms of Tua, we've had a lot of discussions about this. I've continued to say that I think Miami's a great spot for him. We've had plenty of discussions about that. I'm not worried about him at this point, health-wise. I think that conversation has died down. And Gary, I think you'd agree. Any major concern is starting to dissipate about Tua's health.
Sure.
I wonder how that would be different, though, Gary, if the last 6 weeks we'd been living under normal circumstances with a normal media cycle. I wonder if that talk would have stuck around a little bit longer or become more of a factor with more coverage. This is kind of old school, and this is this is more like the mid 90s or the 80s. With less information about draft picks and health and things of that nature. I still feel like he'd be a great fit in Miami. If somebody wants to trade up to get him and start to form him into a starter right now, and there are still plenty of teams that are in need of a quarterback at this point, he should go top 5. I don't think there's any real doubt about that at this point. And I'm convinced he could be a starter out of the gate. The more I think about it, the more I see him. He just feels like a guy who might be coming in at the right time. If he is fully healthy, I think he's got a real shot to make an impact, assuming we have a normal football season.
I'm with you 100%. Speaking of normal, the president held his almost daily press conference yesterday to talk about opening the country back up, kind of put it on the states as individual states in this union to kind of do it in their own way. But he did reference sports, when asked about the normal. He said the normal is going to, and he referenced Bryant-Denny Stadium. Normal is going to be when, we won't tell him that Bryant-Denny only seats 101, 10,000, not 110.
Yeah.
But he said normal is when, Alabama's stadium is full. That is eventually our goal. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But we know initially that's not going to be the case. But the PGA Tour is being very ambitious in setting a tour schedule beginning in June at Fort Worth. They've got dates for all the majors. I don't have a problem with this, Adam, because you have to have a plan. If it doesn't come off, it doesn't come off, but they've set the dates. We're going back to work. We're not going to have fans, but we're going to have a plan in place to test the players and the caddies and maybe try to sequester them in hotels where there aren't any members of the public staying there. But they've got an ambitious schedule that they've laid out. Adam, what do you think of it?
I like it. And here's the other thing too, Gary, and I feel like this is a very common way that people are feeling these days. At least I think so, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel confident in this. There's a very human side of me, human part of me, that is right now the minority in me. Like it's the part of me that is not fully, confident. It's the side of me that's a little bit more scared, that wants to be as cautious as humanly possible. And there's a bigger part of me, a majority of me right now, that just says I want to see stuff get back to normal. And I think every person deals with those, in different percentages. And that fluctuates day to day. So I'm sure I've heard an idea a few days ago that I thought maybe that's not the best idea or the best method to go about it. And then a couple of days later I go, well, maybe there's a way to make this happen. And that's what happens when time passes. You're going to figure out ways to make this work. And I have faith that there's a lot of smart people in a lot of different avenues around the country that can figure out a way to make this work. If with the understanding that if we say June 1, we're doing X, Y, and Z, and we're getting closer to June 1 and we decide, hey, maybe it's not the best idea just yet, will people be understanding of that? And as long as they understand that this is a very fluid situation, I have no problem with making plans and trying to make them into goals and say, I think if we're the PGA, we can have a testing schedule and a testing regimen in place. If we're Major League Baseball, we have a testing regimen and a hotel schedule in place. And that's something Major League Baseball has been talking about, throwing ideas out like that with no fans, sequester the players, keep them distancing, and we have a shot to start to implement some things back. And the last thing I'll say about this, Gary, is I talked to a friend of mine in the military the other day. And again, I don't want to make it sound like major source code material. It's not anything. I just have a friend who serves in reserve duty and was doing that for the last several weeks. And I trust his opinion. And when he says, some industry is going to have to take the forefront on this, and there's going to have to be some industry that says, all right, we have a plan. We think this plan would be a great test tube and test balloon to figure out if we can make this work in multiple industries, staggering starts and staggering how many people come back. And maybe within 13 months on the lower end of the projected spectrum, maybe we can get back to normal after you try to build up some immunity and maybe hopefully get closer and closer to a vaccine. There's a lot of elements to this. I know that was a long answer, Gary. There's a ton of different elements to all of this right now. I'm sure everybody's feelings change on a day-to-day basis because I feel like mine do. But I do think there's a way to set schedules and make them into goals and try to have plans in place with the understanding that you have to be fluid about it. And as long as everybody's understanding of that, I really think it's okay to feel out, dates and feel out, potential benchmarks to try to get back to some level of normalcy.
I think you stated that very well, and I agree 100%. Jeff Passan, the outstanding ESPN baseball reporter, the insider, reported on the Arizona plan. It got poo-pooed a little bit, but it seems like that, honestly, if we're going to get Major League Baseball going here in the near future, that might be the only approach that we can take. It just seems very unrealistic, Adam, that you're going to open up these ballparks all over the country and you're going to have fans. So what do you make of this Arizona plan that you get all the teams out there? Maybe some players wouldn't participate. You know, Mike Trout's already said, I'm going to have a baby. I don't want to have to be quarantined. I'm going to be there. Maybe you have to play these games without some of your star players. Maybe the rosters have to be adjusted. But it does seem to me that probably is the most realistic option for Major League Baseball at this point.
Like we said, Gary, it feels like some industry is going to have to put it. Here's what stinks about it. You're putting people at risk. No matter what, no matter how, unless Dr. Fauci says tomorrow, hey, guess what? We've got a full vaccine and we can give it to everybody within 3 months. Unless that gets said within the next, month, somebody's going to be put at some level of risk.
That's
and
right.
That stinks. And that's why it is so hard to want to pull the trigger on something like implementing plans like baseball has kind of thrown out. And I get poo-pooing the idea, well, sequestering and this and that. At some point, it feels like I may be way off and I'm okay with that. It just feels like to me it's going to happen. And some industries going to have to say, all right, we're going to put 50,000 people across the country back to work within the next week. Let's see how that goes and give it time. I don't know. Again, I'm not smart enough to know how to do this. I'm sure plenty of people want an answer. I don't have the answer. I'm just giving you information that I feel like might, make sense. If it doesn't, that's okay. 'Cause a lot of things don't make sense for the time being. So we're all trying to navigate through this together. Everybody's trying to be as cautious as possible. You can't make these decisions in a vacuum. Your decisions affect a lot of other people. They affect a lot of other industries. So there's no blueprint in place for this. Any pandemic you want to take out of human history in the last 100 years didn't have this type of technological stake, didn't have this type of economic stake. So there is no blueprint for it. And we're all figuring it out together. I think at some point, somebody is going to take the lead, and that will be the next step in trying to figure out what the steps beyond that entail.
All right, Adam, final topic. Jalen Green, the number one prospect in the 2020 ESPN 100, had Auburn as one of his finalists. He says, nope. The NBA is concerned about some of these high school players going to Australia, going to other places overseas. So they've reshaped this G League deal with the NBA Professional Pathway Program, going to pay elite prospects more than $500,000, provide a one-year developmental program outside of the minor league's traditional team structure. Green could be the number one pick next year. I have no problem with this. My issue is let's the NBA and NCAA get together and let's do away with this dumb one and done. If a guy wants to come out of high school and go straight to the NBA, let's let him. Or if he doesn't think he's ready for the NBA but doesn't want to play college basketball, let's let him go into this developmental program. But let's quit forcing guys to go to college for 1 year if they don't want to. That's my take on this. We need to open this thing up. I think it'd be better for college basketball in the long run. And the NBA is obviously concerned about guys going overseas. So let's restructure this and let's let guys play in the NBA right away out of high school the way we used to. What do you think about that?
This may be the most impactful other than how he deals with the COVID-19 saga. This might be the lasting legacy of Adam Silver, in all honesty. This might be the most impactful thing he does in terms of opening up an avenue to not only high school players to get money and avoid school and to get paid to play basketball, which is the risk that they take, one of the risks that they take when they go to college, when they are potential number one type players, is the potential for injury and losing that status, which in turn means losing a lot of dollars and a lot of livelihood. I think the potential impact this could have on the NCAA, this could be something that really goes far in helping determine what name, image, likeness rights look like in the next 2 years.
Yes.
If there's some level of success to this, and the NBA, we've seen things like this. We've seen players like this in situations like this in the past, in the last 15 years. Try to go overseas. Maybe it doesn't really work out. now we're getting more and more higher profile names, and obviously the coverage has changed too. But the more and more higher profile names opting to do things like this, whether it is LaMelo Ball or R.J. Hampton or obviously Jalen Green now, this could be the biggest pathway to a lot more discussion about name, image, likeness, and it's going to happen faster than we realize. That's my kind of view on all this, but this might be the most impactful thing, other than, like I said, dealing with COVID-19. The most impactful thing that Adam Silver ever does as NBA commissioner, because there's going to be a lot of money at stake and a lot of livelihoods at stake for a lot of young people. 17, 18, 19-year-old people are going to be affected greatly by this, hopefully in a positive way. And I think if all works out, kind of reading the tea leaves, there's a lot of potential for this, for a lot of younger people to be taken care of. I think this could be very impactful in a very, very fast manner.
Terrific insight, as always, from Adam Amin. Follow him on Twitter at Adam Amin. And obviously, we're all hoping that at some point here in the future, we have sports and you'll be back doing your outstanding job of doing play-by-play. Thank you so much, Adam.
Anytime, my friend.